Dan Hooker versus Jalin Turner is one of the fights that I'm looking forward to in the main card of UFC 290. And man, I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. I think Jalin Turner is going to annihilate Dan Hooker and get a TKO victory in the second round. And I'm not the only guy who thinks this. If you also check the betting odds, Jalin Turner is the favorite. Now, when you glance on these guys' records, they both don't look so good, with Jalin Turner's record being 13-6 and Dan Hooker's record being 22-12. And they both haven't beaten any big names. Every time they both face someone with a huge name, they both have lost. That being said, the huge difference between these two fighters is that one fighter is improving every fight, that being Jalin Turner, and the other one, being Dan Hooker, as Dan Hooker is declining and looking worse in every fight. And that's probably a huge reason why I don't see Dan Hooker winning this fight. Dan Hooker has taken so many L's over the years and took so much damage at the same time. I mean, look at the wars he had over the years with Barboza, to Paul Felder, to Dustin Poirier, to getting knocked out by Chandler and getting destroyed by Arnold Allen. That's a lot of damage. And if you pay attention, Dan Hooker peaked in the Dustin Poirier fight. I honestly think that fight took away a spark from Dan Hooker, and I believe many years was taken away from that fight. And if that wasn't bad enough, the knockout from Chandler and the beating from Arnold Allen were in fact the nail in the coffin. So yeah, we're going to see the worst Dan Hooker this Saturday. You can argue that Dan Hooker had some wins in between his recent fights, but that wasn't the same Dan Hooker. He was fighting B+ fighters where he out-grappled Nasrat, and he beat another easy stylistic one-dimensional BJJ artist by the name of Claudio. But every time Dan is put in harm's way, he loses. So in reality, in my head, Dan Hooker hasn't beaten anyone with a name. And now as for Jalin Turner, he's someone who has been improving so much over the years. And every time he has lost, you see him evolve and learn how to improve his game. It's literally the opposite of Dan Hooker, like I said earlier. I mean, look at his career so far. He gets finished by Vicente Luque in his UFC debut, and then he realized he needs to go to 155. He goes to lightweight, wins a fight, then gets out-grappled by Matt Favola, and then he realized he has to fix his ground game. Then he fixes it, goes on a 5-fight win streak, becomes more of a complete fighter, and he doesn't lose until he fights Gamrot, who took the fight against Jalin Turner in short notice. And yes, Jalin did lose by a close split decision, but Jalin Turner didn't even have a grappling heavy camp, and he arguably almost won that. Imagine if he did. This is how good this kid is. And that's why this guy is so good. He keeps evolving, and that is something special to see. Also, the guy is called the Triantula for a reason. His height is 6'3", his reach is 77 inches, and the dude packs a punch. Another difference is that he knows how to use his reach better than Dan. I will give Dan some credit. He knows how to use his kicks in range, but Jalin knows how to use his hands well in the outside and the inside. And he has a calm, strong style, and he's really efficient on his boxing. He loves to rip the body and go for the head. And Dan Hooker doesn't block body shots, as seen in the Barboza and Dustin Poirier fight, which Jalin is gonna love attacking with relentless body shot. And Dan doesn't move his head either, and he usually tries to use his offense as his defense. He'll take a couple shots to throw a bunch of shots. But like I said earlier, I don't think he can still do that in this phase of his career. And I think another advantage Turner is gonna have is that he's constantly switching stances, throwing those leg kicks on Dan, as Dan keeps his front leg out there where he's just asking for Jalin to kick them. Jalin also has the grappling advantage, and trust me when I say this, but you do not want to go on the ground with Jalin. He is full of submissions in the ground, he has a tight guillotine, and if he goes on your back, it's going to be a long day for Dan. As for Dan Hooker, his ground game is okay at best. The most I've seen he use it is when he shoots wildly and takes Dustin down, or controls Nasrat. It's nothing special. I'll tell you this though, Dan shouldn't shoot for a takedown. He usually leaves his neck exposed, and I can see Jalin taking advantage of it. So when you break everything down, Jalin Turner is the better MMA fighter with a shitload of ways to win. He can win this fight in the feet, on the ground. So it's just common sense to pick Jalin Turner over Dan Hooker. So I would give Jalin Turner a 75% chance, and I would give Dan Hooker a 25% chance. If this was the OG Dan Hooker, it would have been much closer. Maybe Jalin would have gotten a 60% chance, while Dan would have gotten a 40% chance. It would have been a crazy 3-round fight to see. So yeah, Jalin Turner is going to annihilate Dan Hooker this Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys on my next one.